And welcome in to a Building the Game Plan edition of Fourth Down in the Steel City. How are you? You can tell that we are recording this on Thursday, November 9th, because 30 years ago today was the release of Up from the 36 Chambers, Wu-Tang. For those of you that are only getting the audio version, this is why you need to check it out on the 93.7 The Fan YouTube page, because you can see my Wu-Tang t-shirt. Also the 30th anniversary of Midnight Marauders Tribe Called Quest. But
classic.
We are not here to talk about 30 years ago, because 30 years ago, this would be a matchup of, if I can shake my brain loose just enough, Don Mikowski and Neil O'Donnell, probably.
That would be my guess.
Steelers.
That would be my guess.
Yes. The Magic
Man. The fact that we can guess that makes us old, Chris.
Yes, it does.
The fact that we can guess that makes us old.
Be sure to follow the podcast however you get it, whether it's your favorite podcasting app or inside the Odyssey app. Maybe that's your favorite podcast app. It's free, AUDACY. Download it today and take us with you. Tap follow on those three little dots up there, and you'll be able to get notified as soon as new episodes are available. And again, like I said, you can watch inside the 93.7 The Fan YouTube page. Just tap on that little notification bell down there, and that Josh is handily pointing to, and you'll be able to get new videos as soon as they are available to you, including full episodes of Fourth Down in the Steel City. So this is not Neil O'Donnell and Don Mikowski at Three Rivers Stadium. This is Kenny Pickett and Jordan Love.
I'm looking that up right now, by the way.
Do that, because I don't think they played in 93, but if they did, I'm pretty sure those would be the quarterbacks. I don't know if this quarterback matchup is necessarily any better than the one we would have had 30 years ago on the release date of 36 Chambers and Midnight Marauders, at a time when Neil O'Donnell and Don Mikowski may have been the quarterbacks. But here we are, nonetheless. It's Kenny Pickett and it's Jordan Love. And it's a couple of teams trying to figure out exactly what they got in these young quarterbacks. And one team has the defense to survive the growing pains of the young quarterback. The other team, not so much. And I'll be honest, Josh, credit to all of our friends and colleagues who work in the business, whose job it is to find 5 days worth of material to talk about this game. I have heard uniform discussions. I have heard classic game discussions. I have heard lots of talk about the history and the tradition of the Packers and the Steelers. I'm going to be straight with people. I'm going to be real with you. There's not a lot to talk about inside this game itself. There really isn't. It feels like
I read a profile of Mike Sullivan, the quarterback coach, today.
God,
that's
love
where we are.
That is where we are.
Nothing against Mike Sullivan. His story is phenomenal, but
and a really nice dude too. And a little bit that I've interacted with him. But I'll say this, I don't want to oversimplify it, because that's not what we're here to do. This is a podcast. The whole point is to take a little bit of a deeper dive, right? And talk about the details that matter. And I'm going to be real honest. The details that matter for this one, maybe a couple of injuries here and there. Like if Jair Alexander can't go, that's something obviously worth keeping an eye on, especially as it relates to the distribution of targets between Deontay Johnson and he says non-disgruntled George Pickens. But
other than George Pickens.
Yeah. But other than that, this for me boils down to much the same way the Steelers-Titans game a week and a half ago boiled down to which quarterback makes fewer mistakes, and it ended up being Pickett. Yep. This boils down to which quarterback is forced into more mistakes by the opposing defense. And I'll be real honest, the Packers are not good at forcing quarterbacks into mistakes. They have a -2 turnover differential. They've only forced 8 turnovers this year. I think only 5 interceptions. Mm-hmm. I'll double check that real quick just to make sure that's accurate.
5 interceptions. That is
5
correct.
picks as a team. Jordan Love himself has thrown 8 interceptions in his last 191 pass attempts. So
Wow.
while it feels like Kenny Pickett may be finding a little bit of footing, as ugly as it may be at times, Jordan Love is seemingly sliding backwards down the slippery slope of young quarterback play. And just as the Steelers' defense is starting to get a little closer to healthy, too, with Cam Hayward coming back, doesn't sound like Minka Fitzpatrick will be a go this weekend, but he's getting closer. Look, I hate to make it all about Watt and Highsmith and the Packers defense not having anybody like that and Pickett and Love, but that's kind of what this one boils down to is which team makes fewer mistakes. And this may end up having a very Big Ten West type of feel where, all right, if we got to get out of this one winning by only scoring 16, then we get out of this one winning by only scoring 16 or maybe even only 14.
It's the way you lay it out that way just makes it sound even worse. I've always found ways to look at like how teams do what they do. And then you look at this Packers team, and I'm glad you mentioned like that defensive line not really having anybody, not having any kind of edge guy or like defensive end, anything, or even an outside linebacker similar to TJ Watt or Alex Highsmith. Now you have Preston Smith, who has 4 sacks. Rashawn Gary has 4.5 sacks, and Kenny Clark has 4. That's pretty much it as far as like the guys who generate pressure. That's how they're identified. The guys who have forced turnovers on this team, one of them is already gone because they traded Rasul Douglas. So like that's another thing that kind of sticks out. And you're like, well, what exactly does this team bring to the table? Rasul Douglas, West Virginia Mountaineer, by the way. Got to point that out.
Yes.
But it's you kind of wonder what this team brings to the table because now Rasul Douglas is now in Buffalo. So you're trying to figure out, okay, what exactly on this team really does make them somewhat interesting or somewhat, worth the I guess I shouldn't say the trouble, but worth the effort of trying to figure out what exactly makes them different from the Steelers in this regard. Because you look at the 3-5 record, and then you try to find something different about them. You're like, oh wait, okay, now I understand why. Because the one thing I will say is their defense is very good at keeping points off the board. They're very good at that. I think they're 10th in the league in scoring defense. The problem is the offense is not very good at putting points on the board. So, you talk about the Steelers' point differential.
Yeah.
Green Bay's is not too far away. It's a whopping +1.
But
so
here's the difference between
like evenly matched. Here's where it goes.
And here's the difference between 3 wins and 5 wins in that kind of scenario. It's a turnover. It's a turnover margin, right? It's exactly the big plays by the defense, and they do have. I don't want to make it sound like they don't have anybody on defense. Like I think Devondre Campbell is a good, solid off-ball linebacker. You mentioned Rashawn
so
Gary.
So is Quay Walker, by the way.
Yes. You mentioned Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith. They can get after the quarterback in spots, but that's really what it comes and that's what it comes down to is they have guys who can, but all too often don't make the big play. It's in there in bits and pieces, but you're not going to see them come up with the big play as often as you're going to see Watt and Highsmith and maybe Porter come up with the big plays, or if he were healthy, Fitzpatrick come up with the big plays for the Steelers. And again, that's the one thing I kind of keep an eye on is they do have a little bit of an opportunity, I think, on the back end of the defense. There is an opportunity. Jaden Reed has come up with some big plays. If they can expose the Steelers secondary on the back end, which I think Tennessee didn't really work hard enough to do. I think the Titans seemingly played things a little too close to the vest in trying to protect Will Levis from making mistakes. If you're the Packers and you're 3-5, open it up a little bit. I understand Jordan Love has struggled over the last month, but I don't want to say throw caution to the wind because really maybe the one chance you do have to win this game is to lean even more heavily on Aaron Jones and try to take the air out of the ball and try to make it, like I said, a Big Ten West kind of game. But if you're able to do that and you get late in the ball game, take a shot, go over the top. And I think that holds for both sides here. If it's 13-10 and you're down by a field goal and you got the ball with 4 or 5 minutes left, ain't no shame in pulling a Flacco and chucking 140 yards down the field and praying for a DPI.
And the Steelers already did that, by the way. They did it against Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
They were down in that fourth quarter, and Kenny Pickett saw that zero blitz coming. They called the protection, and he went up top to George Pickens. Like there are opportunities every once in a while in the game, and this team is actually taking advantage of doing that. And I'm glad you brought up Jordan Love, because if you go back to before the season started, there were stories being written about this Packers offense and Jordan Love, and they weren't necessarily glaring endorsements. They were more like, hey, temper your expectations. This might take
Mm-hmm.
a while.
Yeah.
And when you hear that kind of talk surrounding your quarterback who's finally getting his first shot as a starter, that's not something you want to hear. It doesn't really sound promising. So when you see what this offense really has become, and it's not like it's. I know we talked a lot about the defense and the names there. And by the way, Quay Walker is one of those mutants that came from that ridiculously good team at Georgia. They just
Yeah. Uh,
Green Bay decided to kill its mutants on defense as opposed to the Steelers getting theirs on offense.
The
But
Monstars on defense. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
he's another guy though who's questionable for this weekend. Like if you're
he
without Quay
is.
Walker and without Jair Alexander, now
That's
you're
bad.
you're
That's
talking
bad.
about having no big plays on the defensive side of the ball. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now on the other side of things, on the offensive side, they got Aaron Jones back. And if there's anything that's going to help your offense succeed, having Aaron Jones back is going to help you. And A.J. Dillon, we already know what A.J. Dillon is. I mean, we just saw what Derrick Henry did last week. A.J. Dillon isn't the kind of terror that Derrick Henry can be on the defense, but he can still tote the rock. He can still get tough yards, and he can still run through a lot of tough lines. So that's something that's still in Green Bay's back pocket. But having Aaron Jones is what makes it more palatable, I guess you could say, for this offense,
Mm-hmm.
because he missed a handful of games, but he averages 4 yards a carry. He's caught 14 passes and averaged 10.5 yards per catch. He's caught, and 7 of them have gone for first downs. So he's a guy that when he's healthy, this offense looks a lot better because they can count on him to move the ball down the field and be able to move the chains. Can you really count on anybody as readily? Maybe, maybe not. But that's the guy that they need in order for that offense to click. And we're going to see a little bit more of Aaron Jones in this game.
I would think so. I mean, and this is another thing that I don't understand what Tennessee was thinking last week, but you're going up against the 29th ranked rush defense in the league as far as yards given up per game. Why are
Mm-hmm.
you not leaning on the run game more? If you're going to go conservative and not really try to do anything deep downfield in the pass game because you want to protect your young quarterback, again, a lot of allegories here between Tennessee and what Green Bay may want to do, then at the very least, lean on your stud running back, or in this case, your very good stud running back and a very good complement. And Tennessee had that opportunity, and one of the top 5 coaches in the NFL, Mike Vrabel, didn't do it. And
Yep.
I mean, do we get the same overthinking from Matt LaFleur, I guess is my question. Does he overthink and end up putting his offense in a position where rather than just chewing up some stuff on the ground, which again, 29th rush defense in the league the Steelers have, and Aaron Jones is coming back and healthy, and you've got an opportunity to lean into that? Or do you try to overdo it with your dink and dunk passing game because that's the background you come from and that's what you think your quarterback should be doing? Or like it's almost like I joked about 30 years ago, but it's almost like both of these teams, the Packers this weekend and Tennessee last Thursday night, would have benefited from the old school late 80s, early 90s thought process of run and run and run, play action, hit it deep over the top, and run and run and run. Hey, by the way, here's another play action pass. We're going to hit you deep over the top, or at least try to.
Mhm.
And instead, you get West Coast to a T, spread it out, dink and dunk. And I don't think that's Will Levis's bread and butter. I don't think it will be when he's at his best. And I don't know. Maybe that is Jordan Love's bread and butter, but if that's all he's got, then he's just not very good.
to your point about 1993 and 30 years ago, I did the research on the quarterbacks at the time. We got one of the two. You got Neil O'Donnell.
Okay.
Believe it or not, Brett Favre was already a Packer in 1993.
That would have been his first year then, right? Because wasn't he
Probably his first
drafted in
year. Yeah, because he
'92 and was with Atlanta
was
for a
in
year?
Atlanta
Yeah.
in '92. Yeah, so it was his first year as a Packer in '93. But
Dang.
the other quarterback in Green Bay that year that actually played in the game that year would probably be a more familiar name to you. Ty Detmer.
Oh, wow.
Ty
Yes.
Detmer was the backup in '92 or '93. BYU's
That's
own Ty
wild.
Detmer.
Wow.
That was a
I
guy who
remember
knew about throwing the ball at
I remember
BYU.
they thought he was gonna be a thing there.
I
And
do too. I remember he was a Heisman Trophy winner, wasn't he?
did he win or he was a nominee? He didn't win, did he? Didn't Andre Ware win maybe that?
I gotta go back and look at that. I
All
thought Ty
right,
Detmer
it's
won a Heisman.
research time again here on 4th Down in the Steel
Yeah.
City, and 1993 Heisman winner was
1990 Heisman Trophy winner Ty Detmer.
you're kidding me. God dang.
Yep.
That man won a Heisman
Lavelle
Trophy.
Edwards passing offense. Lavelle Edwards
That's
offense at
true.
BYU, throwing the ball a whole bunch of times. Ty Detmer's one of those guys. Steve Young, Jim McMahon, Ty Detmer,
So
Robbie Bosco. Now we're really showing our age talking about all these
I
old
was gonna
BYU
say,
quarterbacks.
so here we go again. We're talking 2023, first weekend, second full weekend in November, Steelers Packers, and it only took us like
We're doing the
15
same
minutes.
thing.
We're doing the same thing. This is the same thing everybody's doing when they're talking about this game this week. They're
We're
like,
doing the Green Bay Pittsburgh sidebar.
but it's this is what happens when there's just not I don't and this is again I understand you come to us for like a deep dive on things. This is a Steelers podcast, right? Being produced in the city of Pittsburgh, and you're out there in like Wyoming or New Mexico or somewhere deep down in the Everglades, like your neighbors are gators, and that's about all you got within 10 miles of you. And you're like, all I need to know is what's going on with them Steelers. And I'm here to tell you, not much has changed in the last 10 days. What this Steelers team needs to do is simply not turn the football over. And I'll liken it a bit. And those of you that aren't Penguins fans won't follow this analogy, but the Penguins, when they play boring hockey, they're better. They played a boring hockey game against the Anaheim Ducks a few nights ago. So boring, I fell asleep in the middle of it and woke up like an hour after the game was over. And I was like, oh, they won? Okay, great. 2-0. Awesome. But that's what this Pittsburgh Steelers team has become in that I ain't asking for the offense to do too much, Josh. Kenny Pickett just needs to protect the football. I think we did see against Tennessee that they can lean into the run game a little bit. Maybe here's one bullet point to bring up as far as what we see from the Steelers this weekend and over the next couple of weeks on offense is, do we see an increasing share of carries for Jaylen Warren, who is really starting to assert himself, I think, more yards after contact. Just doing more with the football over the last couple of weeks. It's long been this back and forth about Harris and Warren. You're going to need both to succeed. We both said that last week
Yes.
in the wake of the win over the Titans. It's not about who's one and who's two necessarily, I don't think, but it is a question of, they asked themselves this a couple of years ago down in Dallas. Is Pollard going to get more touches? Is Pollard going to get more touches? And he slowly got more touches and he slowly got more touches to the point where eventually he made Zeke a bit expendable, right? And we may still be a year or two away from that in the case of Najee Harris becoming expendable. I'm not going to suggest he'll ever get to that point, but he may, because Jaylen Warren is just chipping away at the number of snaps that he's getting, the number of reps that he's getting, and the productivity with those snaps.
Here's where I remind people that Jaylen Warren's usefulness is not just in the run game. It's
Mm-hmm.
also in the passing game. It's in the pass protection game, even though sometimes it costs him part of his game check to do his job too well.
Which is crazy.
But it's insane that he gets fined for blocking defensive linemen well in pass protection.
I think the man's paying to play in the NFL this year at this point. The number of fines.
It feels like it, right? It absolutely feels like it. But the job that he does in the passing game side of things, I think, proves his worth just as much, if not more, than what he does in the run game. And here's why I'm going to say this, because I know a lot of people are saying, oh, he needs to get more carries than Najee Harris. I don't care how Jalen Warren gets the ball in his hands. I just want to see him with the ball in his hands helping this offense. But here's one big reason why. Who do you think is tied for second on this team in targets and is second alone on this team in receptions? It's Jalen Warren.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that sticks out. That's something that should catch everybody's attention about, okay, well, he needs to be able to do this in the run game. He needs more carries. No. Don't worry about getting Jalen Warren carries. Just get
He's getting the
Jalen
ball
Warren
plenty.
touches.
The ball.
Just get him touches. Touches work for him because Najee Harris is 115 touches. Jalen Warren has 85. Get him touches and see what he does with those touches. And he averages 5.5 yards per touch. Just get him touches. If you got to throw him some of those swing passes, and the Steelers took advantage of that a lot against Tennessee. Throwing some swing passes, getting him out in the open, using him as a safety valve, doing those things, I think is what helps your offense. So I think we're looking at it. I think we like to look at running backs in terms of just what they do carrying the football. Jalen Warren can also catch the football. So don't discount that side of it. And I think we saw more of that against Tennessee and how important it can be if it works. We also saw it against Vegas. We saw it against Baltimore. I'm trying to think of another game we saw it against. We had a big play catch for some yards.
Cleveland
a couple times.
Did he have
Cleveland,
one against the Browns? Yeah,
but he had a big catcher run against Baltimore. So those are plays that he can make that Najee probably can't make, and probably some plays that receivers specifically can't make because they don't have that kind of center of gravity.
So here's something I think we may have stumbled upon as we feel our way through the dark room that is an analysis of Steelers Packers on a week where both offenses are bleh, and only one defense can really change a game. Jalen Warren is third on this team in big plays of 20 yards or more.
There you go.
He's behind only George Pickens and Najee Harris. George Pickens has 12 big plays. My God. Najee Harris has 4. Jalen Warren has 3. 1 in the run game, 2 in the receiving game. He's tied with Deontay Johnson for 3 big plays on this team. And I guess my point here is that maybe the analysis is not about Warren v. Harris. It's more about Warren v. everybody else. Like, how do we rank the weapons on this team? And maybe that's the interesting deep dive that needs to be taken, especially with Freiermuth inching closer and closer to coming back. You would think in at least one of those, the 2 Ohio games, he's back, right? Cincy or Cleveland.
Right.
So how do we, in a world where we're so worried and everybody wants to talk about George Pickens' social media, let's talk about the actual on-field repercussions of why George Pickens is upset. George Pickens is upset because George Pickens thinks he should get the ball all the time, because George Pickens thinks he's open all the time, or at least if he's not open, he can get himself open, right? And just give me the football. I'm the best big play machine on this team. And he's right about that. He is, as evidenced by the dozen big plays that he's got so far this year. So George Pickens should be getting a ton of targets. We all agree with that. Deontay Johnson may be the most reliable target in Kenny Pickett's eyes. Freiermuth, when healthy, probably not far behind. But now we're getting to the point where we've got to find touches for Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. And this is, I guess we could call it a good problem to have, but this is where you start to think about, okay, our offensive line is starting to come around to where it's built for the run game, right? Broderick Jones is clearly, he's going to get another start at right tackle this week. He's clearly built for that. Yep, I know.
Love it. Love it.
Between he and Darnell Washington and their downfield blocking, this team should be leaning into the run game a little more. To your point, it's not necessarily just about the run. It's about the touches. So maybe we're talking screen game. Maybe we're talking swing passes. But when you get to the point where your 4 big play targets, okay, there's the one, there's the guy, there's Pickens. And then the next tier, 2 of the 3 are running backs and only 1 is a wide receiver. Rather than talking about, again, Harris v. Warren, talk to me about how you're going to get all these guys the ball. George is first. We all agree. Needs to get the ball more than anybody else. That's on him getting open, and he's seeing some crazy coverages right now. But then tell me how you're going to get Deontay, Najee, and Jalen the football. And it's not about running back v. running back. It's about weapon v. weapon. Tell me how you're going to use these weapons at your disposal, Matt Canada, and you've called a much nicer game the last 2 weeks. How are you going to use these weapons at your disposal to start to expand this offense a little bit?
And if you can answer that question, particularly, then you can answer the question of how do you get George Pickens the ball? Because if you're answering that first question of how you're getting Warren and Harris and Deontay Johnson the ball, now defenses are going to have to try to figure out how you stop that from happening. And there's only one way to do it. You got to stop taking the attention off of that guy wearing 14. Because I'll say this again. Go ask Baltimore what happened when they took the attention off George Pickens and left him outside one-on-one. It just there's a stark difference in what can happen with this offense just simply by leaving that guy in man coverage without safety help up top. That's how dangerous he can be with just that pre-snap look. So if you can have, like you mentioned, if you can have both running backs involved, whether it's Najee carrying the ball and Warren catching or carrying the ball, and Deontay Johnson being able to help dictate in short to intermediate and helping move the chains, because I feel he really is the most pure understanding of a possession receiver at this particular point in his career. So if you can have those things clicking for you, and you mentioned the run game, by the way, not only having the run game with the offensive line getting better there, but your offensive line giving your quarterback time to throw. Because by the way, Kenny Pickett wasn't sacked at all last week. A lot of that was the offensive line, and some of that was him by himself, being able to move around in the pocket and being a lot better responding to that kind of situation. But all of those things come together to maybe, I don't know, show some growth in versatility with this offense. Are we allowed to say that? Hold on.
Hold on. Let me check with the judges.
Looking at the script here.
Are we allowed to?
Lifting the page.
They say they're going to allow it. They're going to allow.
Yep,
that,
here it is.
That,
yep.
It's allowed. Okay.
It's allowed. Yeah. You can't give the offensive coordinator credit for it though. That's what it says on that.
Judges.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They said. Yeah.
Okay.
It's probably just.
Okay.
It's probably just because Kenny made the call himself. Okay. All right. Yeah. We'll pass that along.
Same thing I read. Thing I read. Okay. Cool.
Good to know. So he can't.
Oh, it's good to have that rule book nearby when you need it. It helps.
So there were a couple snaps against Tennessee where I remember seeing Warren and Harris on the field at the same time. Only a couple. Is it Tennessee or maybe even the previous week against one of the previous weeks, maybe against LA? Here nor there. I remember seeing it in the last few weeks. Warren and Harris on the field at the same time. I'm not advocating for that happening all the time, but I think we're, again, as Freiermuth starts to get closer and closer to coming back, we're starting to get to the point where you think about how these targets, to your point, can be used to work off of one another. Like, you line me up Calvin Austin and George Pickens on the same side of the field and send them on a post corner combo, right? Where our outside man is running the post and our slot guy is running the corner. And watch that safety or safeties, regardless of whether they're playing 2 or 3 high, try to read that. Yeah, watch the head explosion emoji. I got no problem with it. And use your underneath weapons. Harris, Warren, Deontay, Freiermuth, whatever. I mean, Darnell Washington is still alive and breathing oxygen. It's just a thought, just an idea. And combo those guys at the next level down. That's the one thing, I guess, as we sit here and we are allowed to compliment Matt Canada and the fact that he's done a better job the last couple of weeks. And we are allowed to acknowledge the fact that he's done good work and starting to find, I think, a little bit of an identity for this offense. But the one thing I still struggle with, Josh, is that we don't see the same layered concepts that we see in other offenses' route trees or schemes. I'm sure you did the same thing when you were in school. I would sit there and scribble in a notebook, and I would just sit there, and I would literally, I'm just going to draw it up right now. I would have my slot guy and my receiver, and maybe I'd put a tight end over here. Well, that tight end's going to be ineligible because I got him on a line. Let me fix him. And then I'm going to put a quarterback in shotgun, and then put it back there. And then I would just think to myself, like, what kind of combinations can I run with these guys, right? I'll swing the running back out here, and I'll run a little shallow out, and then I'll run another. And you just start to kind of, I don't know if you can see that because of the light, but like you start to think about how can I get this guy to come out and this guy to come in, and just, even if I'm not getting a rub here, can I just get something that draws the corner up into one and leaves the other guy open, or vice versa with the safety biting on one? Same thing over here. Can I get a linebacker who jumps on the in and maybe leaves the flat open? Like, how many times did we do that as kids in our notebooks in high school?
I feel so seen right now because that was like every other page of
Right.
every other book I had in school was just drawing up football
But
players that I know didn't work, but I knew I had to try to do something.
but you had to draw it up on the paper just to imagine. How many times
Yes.
have we seen a Matt Canada play look kind of like that, right? It doesn't happen typically. And again, I'm not just here for blanket criticism of Matt Canada just because that's what we're supposed to do, right, judges? Is that what we're supposed to? Yeah, the judges say that's what we're supposed to do, but I'm not here for that. But like, what I will say is that too many Matt Canada schemes end up looking like, and I'm just going to draw this up real quick. Um, and yeah, I'll go like that. And then this guy's going to stay in and block. And this guy's probably going to stay in and block too. And everybody go deep. See that? Everybody going deep. Oh, this running back, yeah, he might leak out for a little outlet later. But like,
See,
we don't.
who expected us to literally build the game plan in this episode? I know you didn't see that coming.
But like,
YouTube viewers, you didn't think we were actually going to literally build the game plan, did you?
right, again, this is
Didn't
why
see
you got to
that
watch on
coming.
YouTube. I know some people think
Exactly.
the YouTube viewership is not as valuable as the audio only listenership, but we
It's way
value it
more
here.
fun.
It is.
Way more fun.
So just give me a little bit more layered concepts in the pass game from Matt Canada, and I really do think because of the number of weapons that they have now, and they can start
Yes.
to grow something here. And once you start to move the ball downfield through the air just a little bit, and then all of a sudden there's room to breathe in the run game, or vice versa. I don't want to say they're on the verge of something, but well, I will. I'll say this. They're on the verge of
No,
not sucking
I think you're
anymore
onto it.
offensively.
I think you're onto something very, very particular. I talked about this last Sunday on 93.7 The Fan. I opened the show with it. This is a Steelers offense that for the first time, for me against Tennessee, some of the things they were doing made sense to me.
Yeah.
Not only because of what Matt Canada was doing, but because Matt Canada was doing things that the guys on the field were actually good at. He was doing things that the personnel on the field could actually execute. You had Najee Harris running the ball in gap blocking schemes. You had Jalen Warren running the ball in either a gap blocking scheme or a zone blocking scheme. You had a guy like Broderick Jones who can both run block well and pass block well on that right side of the offensive line, and not only getting to the second level in zone plays, but he's also taking guys out on gap blocking plays. He's pulling across the formation on a play here and there. They're able to use guys that can do things a little bit more specifically that tailor to what they're trying to do. And I hate to seem to sound like this is maybe picking on somebody, but we saw the Steelers at 11 personnel a lot in that game against Tennessee. And the
Yeah.
question why is something I don't think we go deep enough into detail about. Think about who the tight ends were in a lot of those 11 sets. They were either Connor Hayward or Donnell Washington. You know what those guys can do? They can run block besides being able to catch the ball occasionally, but they can run block, which is something their starting tight end does not do particularly well. So when you have guys in that can do more than one thing, and you can actually put them in situations where you don't know what's going to happen because you see the
Right.
personnel and you know the personnel involved isn't just so specialized at doing one thing, guess what? It makes your offense a lot less predictable. And that's what they've looked like the past couple of weeks. They look a lot less predictable because now they can protect their quarterback. Now you got guys that can actually block for the running backs. Now you have skill position players that aren't just in on these plays because it's just not the one thing they do well. Now you're able to take advantage, like you mentioned, of all of the weapons, put them all, not to steal the Loki reference, but all the pens in the same cup and use them all together at the same time. Now we're seeing that from this offense because we weren't seeing it before because either they weren't all healthy at the same time or they weren't put in situations where they can do what they did well at that time. But now you're
Yeah.
seeing all of them, if not all, most of them healthy, and then the ones that are there put in positions to succeed at what they do well. And now you see the results.
It feels like this week, and look, you're not at the point with this team where you can look at games and say winning is not the primary goal, and that's not what I'm going to say here. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it feels like this is a week where maybe you can look for growth,
Win on
right? You
purpose?
yeah,
Win on
it,
purpose.
win on purpose. I like that. But like, I don't want to just chalk it up as a W, right? Because who knows what could happen? Anything's possible with this team. But it feels like a game that there is enough should win in this game for the Steelers that maybe it's an opportunity to kind of spread your wings and fly, little birdie.
Mm.
Spread the wings on offense just a little bit. Try some different things. Now, that's not to say that you don't
Right.
look up at halftime and you're losing 7-3 and you need to buckle back down and figure out what works or go to what you know does work. But I think there's an opportunity here with the two Ohio games, like I said, on tap after this, Cleveland and Cincy. And then Arizona and New England after that, and I think Indy the week after that. Like, you should win at least 4 of the next 6. And that being said, it also means you've got an opportunity to find some things out as you get, again, closer to 100% healthy on offense, closer to finding the right mix on the offensive line, and closer maybe to your quarterback figuring some things out about himself as he gets to talk to his OC on a regular basis now that he's down on the sideline and not up in the booth. I feel like we're on, I said I didn't want to. We're on the verge of doing more than not sucking, maybe, Josh, as far as the offense goes.
No, I'm totally on board with this. And if there's any reason why this week is a good time to do it, because the matchup favors it. The
Mm-hmm.
matchup favors the Steelers in the fact that they're facing a team that's really good at beating themselves. I
Yeah.
said this a few weeks back. Bad teams beat themselves. Average teams beat bad teams more often than not, and they beat other average teams. Every once in a while, they beat a good team. Good teams beat bad teams and average teams. Sometimes they beat another good team. Sometimes they beat great teams. Great teams beat everybody, but every once in a while, they might lose to a team that's not great. But that's really what it comes down to. So you have the Steelers that I would probably put somewhere between the average category and maybe good. Just what the numbers will probably tell
Yeah.
you average. Some will probably argue below average, and you say, you know what, you can't argue with the numbers. But that caliber of teams should still beat a team that beats itself.
Yeah.
And they've won at least 3 or 4 games by beating teams that beat themselves. So this is
Yeah.
another one of those examples where you're facing a team that generally is pretty good at beating itself. So that's your baseline right there, as far as what you do. Then let's add
Mm-hmm.
on some things that make you look like a team that can beat bad teams, that can beat average teams, and maybe beat more than one good team or more than a couple good teams. They have beaten a couple good teams, but show that you can do something like that to really push yourself further into the good category, as opposed to maybe straddling the fence between average and bad one week and average and good the next week. Do some things that add a little bit more to the resume that maybe push you into the good category.
The fact that we're even talking about any of this, like there's a chance they could do good things on offense, is a sign of how far they've come in the last 3 weeks, I think, since the bye week.
I'd say
Um,
so.
so again, a team that looks to find itself after the bye and start trending in an upward direction, and the schedule seems to lend itself to them continuing to find themselves, or at least we hope. That's about as much as you can ask for at this point in the year, and for the schedule to stack up again for you to get that opportunity against teams you should be beating. It starts this Sunday, 1:00 at Acrisure Stadium. Don't call it. That tells you where I am. I just
Oh, you
called it
did it.
Acrisure.
You did it. You did it. He said, oh, he said it. He said it. No, this is
I
a
didn't say
Family Guy
nothing.
reference
I
for
didn't.
those unfamiliar. I got to drop the one. I didn't get a chance. I didn't get a chance to drop the one wire reference of the day because you mentioned this earlier, and I think this is a game. This game is another perfect opportunity to do it. Remember what Prop Joe told Stringer? I believe it was season 3. Keep it boring, Strang. Keep it dead effing boring. This
Yeah,
is a good game to
to
keep it
keep
dead
it
effing
boring.
boring.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna leave it at that. Wise words of
Keep it.
proposition, Joe. And if you steal
Keep
from
them,
him, he'll murder your whole family.
keep them corners quiet. Keep them corners quiet. Keep it dead and boring. I like that. And hey, I'll take 16-13. I'll take 14-10, whatever it's got to be. Give it to me. If the Steelers get another dub and they are 6-3 going into those two big games against Cleveland and Cincy, I think we'll all be happy with the result. Thanks to Josh Taylor. Thanks to you for watching. And if you did, you got to see some highly detailed play design there. Thanks to all of you.
You got to do that every week now for building the game plan. You know you got to like have a diagram up now.
I got to start.
We should have Greg put one in a graphic and just put it on the screen.
It's got to be real. It's got to be a real rudimentary drawing, though, like on the back of a scratch pad, like I just did. It can't look good at all.
We should do what they do in Little Giants when the
it's got to be like the old school, like it's got to be like the old school. Remember the old school line paper that was like the sand color that was really really thin. If you even erased it too hard, it would tear. It's got to be that kind of paper, but like in erasable ink. You got to do it that way. You got to take it. You got to take it all the way old school.
So you still see the shadow of what you had written before from the eraser marks? Yeah, absolutely. We'll do that every week.
Smudge from the bottom of your hand on it.
We'll get you a chalkboard.
How it's done, baby.
Oh, no. Chalkboard's way too advanced for this, Greg. Way too advanced. Until next time, we will talk to you after the Steelers and Packers with a post-game edition breakdown of this one and a look ahead to the Browns in the following week. For Greg Finley, our intrepid producer who's got some sketches to come up with, for Josh Taylor, thanks again for listening inside your Odyssey app or wherever you get the podcast, for watching here on the 93.7 The Fan YouTube page. This has been Fourth Down in the Steel City.